for me, it's like I only did whatever given instruction given in the
Yeah.
not extra.
Did you go through the bonus? Not the bonus, like the
Yeah.
thinking in
Thinking
React.
React, yeah.
That's also really important because to get a grasp of like why people build React and stuff like that. So did you all go through it? Please, if you didn't, do it. It's really important to do that for all of you because it like what's really difficult about React is you can see that at the end we are just doing HTML and CSS or just HTML and JavaScript. It's like it's not something new, but like the way you think about it, like the abstraction,
Yeah.
like how to do things. That's the difficult part. Not really what you because like the to-do list and stuff. You can do that with HTML. You are more than capable of doing that. You can just like loop through LIs and stuff. But what we should really get is the abstraction, like how to think in terms of React, how to build stuff in terms of React. That's a really important thing that you should practice too. And so who like has questions about it? I know that you have. Just before you, like some questions about the last homework. If you have, if you, I don't know, something didn't really get into your mind from last time.
I couldn't upload mine because I'm having problems with GitHub.
Okay.
Probably I'll upload it later. Yeah. The problem I had is with the how to assign key.
What does auto mean?
The key for the airlines you said you taught us last week about that
Oh, the key.
The key.
The key.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, the
So
key.
where to put it? Is it with the UL?
It's the
or
you
with
put
the
it
airline?
so
it was
so when you have let me just show you an example. Let me just
So we put ID and then we did
because I use ID, yeah, it's ID, and it was giving me error when I put it in the airline, but when I put it in the UL.
I also have some question regarding the key.
yes, I will just I don't know
When I
even
created this, I put the ID, so I
ID,
use the
yeah.
ID.
That was
But with this homework, you can also use this to do. It's unique. Each to do is different.
because I used ID, but I looked at the console log, I was having an error.
The same error.
I was having error when I used ID, but I put the ID within the airline, within the list element, but it was giving me error, so I had to go up to the UL.
Are you using that map element? You're referring that element?
So
Yeah,
when
sometimes it's like we just forgot and.
we have for example here.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you're doing math.
So for example if you have
Okay, I was doing map outside the UL.
oh yeah, you should not do that because you want to build elements inside the UL, not outside of the UL.
Yeah, I was doing it outside.
So if you have an li here, so if you have an li here, the key should go here.
Yeah.
So the key, like every time you put it inside like the first ancestor, the first
Yeah.
component inside the map.
Yeah.
Not this one, not this one. You put it inside. If there's an li and a div, you put it on the first li.
No, I actually built it inside. Yeah, just that I built my airline inside the UL,
Yeah.
and the map was also inside. Okay. It's quirky. I was looking at last week's
Okay.
exercise. I didn't upload it. If I'd uploaded it, I maybe would have done it.
But is this key necessary always when we try to render multiple elements?
Because I
No
told you
matter
last
if
time,
it's li or MKT.
last Git React needs to know exactly like which element changed.
Yeah.
As I told you last time. For example, like I don't know if we. I will just bring it back.
Okay. It's like I saw some videos they are using index as a key. If there is
It's
map,
easy to identify.
keys like
And also it's-
they are telling that it's a good way to put some like if you are using SQL or like Mongoose, they will generate ID automatically.
Yeah.
And we can use that directly. Then it's a unique one because if data is big, still that SQL software they will take the ID as a unique. Here they are saying that it's like it's not good idea to use rendering variable as
Yeah.
a ID as a key and also index as a key. So they are saying that if data is too big, they have some issue. How
Yeah, I saw some tutorials where they
code revolution?
no, I don't know which one was. They told about some library where they generate new ID.
Yeah.
It was like ID dash one dash ID dash 0 dash 1, and then the second one ID dash 0 dash 2. So like that.
Did you try some like it's like using like database with Node and everything like together
With React?
with React?
No, I
I
didn't
did
want to
that
complicate.
with Angular, and then I know that it is generating automatically.
But I was trying also to fetch this web app, and yeah, some new way of fetching with async functions, and then
Yeah.
await.
Okay.
It was so simple, you know, rather than doing like fetch this URL that then respond and this JSON, and then that data is kind of raw data. It's with a way two lines.
Okay. In Mongo, it's like whenever you are like it's generating automatically. You can see that like if database is connected properly. It's easy with Mongo, but I don't know with
MongoDB?
SQL, yeah, with SQL how it works.
So the idea is that if you have a list, let's say you have a list of names, okay?
Yeah.
And these are names. If you render them, it will be a list of allies. Ally, 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 and ally. Okay?
Yeah.
So this element matches the first one, this element will, so we have a map, we convert from strings to allies. We did that.
Yeah.
Make sense? So let's say I will remove this element. Technically this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. So I will literally write here 1, 2, 3, and 4. Literally there is string inside it. So if I will remove the element number 4, or sorry, remove the element number 3, that means that I will remove it from here. That means I will remove it from here. Okay? So we will have 1, 2, 4.
Yeah.
Because 3 was removed. Okay? But how will we, so because React will compute, React will say, oh, when you remove this, the tree will be like, it will be 1, 2, and 4.
Yeah.
React cannot really know exactly which thing was removed because React cannot rely on the value. So you need to give it a key. So if you say this key 1, this key 2, this key 3, this key 4, and this key 1, this key 2, this key 4, React will know that 3 is missing. So 4 is becoming 3. So it doesn't mix up the
And then
data.
your array is going to be 1, 2, 3, yeah?
Your array will be 1,
So we
1,
can use
2,
the array
4.
index.
No, the new one when you delete.
Because this was 1, this one was 2, this one was 3, this one was 4.
Yeah.
So when you remove 3, 4 will be here. In terms of index, this will be 3.
Oh, yeah.
The index
will
I'll
be
try
tree,
to
yeah.
do
But this is why you should not use index.
Index,
Because
yeah.
index is random, it doesn't
Okay,
concern
yeah.
like the
Okay.
stability of something. This is why, for example, you should have something like this: ID, 1,
Yeah.
text, a value. And after that, ID, 2. So every entity inside the object will have an ID.
Yeah.
So if you remove the third, the fourth will still have a static ID, which is
4.
4.
Yeah.
So React will not be like mixed up with the IDs. That does it make sense?
Yeah.
Choosing the key.
Yeah, you should be wise while choosing the key. Most of the time, you will have what you display. It will be coming from backend, so coming from database, and normally everything is normalized and has an ID. So probably you should choose that ID. This is like
But it was a library where it generates new keys.
yeah, but these
is
keys
that
are not stable. If the user
nothing?
refresh,
Yeah.
you will get new IDs. It's like,
Yeah.
But as for now, it's fine because we are not building anything real. As for sense.
So if
But-
you get just random, that's also not too.
Yeah, that's not a bad
No.
option.
No.
But for a long-term solution, for real solution, that's like no. You should have something stable. if you check it after 1 year, it should be the same ID, kind of.
Yeah.
Of course, even the database may change, but it's a low frequency change, so it's just keep it here. Yes. So, yeah. You more questions? More questions? Just ask.
Oh,
Yes.
The key was
Yeah.
okay.
You had a lot of questions, so feel free to ask.
but actually I was trying to do in a app .js I was trying to create two components.
Yes.
Okay, and I want to export two components separately, not a file. So I was exporting one component as export component name.
Default.
Default.
Just export component name. Yeah.
And semicolon. And another component is export component name and semicolon.
Yeah.
And it was not working.
Okay. Yeah. No. That.
And,
That. Oh, let's say I will have. Let's say I have a counter.
Yeah.
Let's
yeah,
say.
I tried with computer systems.
Let's say I have a counter component. Okay. I will copy this. I'll just make it empty. I will call it counter2.
Yeah.
I want to export both of them, but as separate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one.
This is the way you should do it.
Yeah, I did that. It didn't work.
It does work.
Yeah.
You need to. Do you need to put semicolon?
No. Well,
Yeah.
semicolons are optional in JavaScript,
Yeah. Okay.
so never confuse about it.
Do you know?
But no.
Do you all know what that means when you don't put the semicolon with the key and the value?
I don't know.
Okay. Can you explain that?
Yes. What he's talking about is that why you are doing this instead of counter like this. This is what you mean.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is something called I think like I did a mistake last time not explaining it. But the idea is that if for example you have, let's say you have const, or let's say var name equal Yunus. Okay? And you want to say user equal var user equal name is that variable name. Make sense?
Yeah.
In the new JavaScript versions, you can just omit that,
Yeah.
and it will be. It's called shorthand property, so it will expand. So
You get the
anytime
value
you
of name.
anytime you do this, JavaScript will convert it to this. Anytime you do name y, JavaScript will convert it to name y. Make sense? It's more of a shorthand thing.
Okay.
Okay. But here, it's not really a property shorthand because you cannot do this here. You cannot do counter. We cannot do, for example, like C counter. This doesn't work because it's not an object. It's more of an import block. So the way you should do it is with an as. If you want to rename.
Yeah.
Is it
The same way you do it in the import, you say as
Yeah.
Or in
to
database, yeah.
to rename the import.
Okay. So while importing, we need to put again like this object type and.
So either you say like counter,
Yeah.
or if you want to export it,
Yeah.
as Benjamin said, in a different name, you can just say counter
As.
hello counter. And now people will import hello counter instead of
Yes,
counter.
yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, but in some tutorials, for example, we have like here two class components, and counter one was export default counter,
And the other one.
and the one with
Well,
Yeah.
this is more of a semantic thing. This is something you should decide with yourself. Is like, for example, if I have a main file. For example, if I have this file called counter and there is a main component inside it, I will export it as default.
Yeah.
And if there's like additional things, I'll put them as named. But if I have two components and they are equal and none of the not one of them is important than the other, it doesn't really make sense to import one of them as export default. So it's more of a semantic thing than a rule to follow. You know what I mean? Like, you should organize your import and export the way you like, and the way it works for you more than. But usually you should not put more than two things in the same file. This is like not a good idea.
It's not a good idea.
We have been doing that just for the simplicity. I don't want you to keep switching between files while watching me coding.
So what I did that I didn't put two components in one file because it didn't work for me. I did the same way what you did, but so I created two different files for two different components. Then
Then you export default.
export. But after that, if you can open my file, in the index I tried to pass array.
Yeah.
If you can open, I can show you.
Yeah, where?
This is like it's difficult to explain.
Your homework?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't work for me.
Swap.
Yeah, this is the down. Yeah.
This
Down
one?
Yeah.
Index, yeah.
Index.
So here I created two files, one for component and one for app. In the component there is component for this component.
Yeah. Should I go to app?
So yeah.
Should.
So this is the application file where I have put one task component.
Yeah.
Okay.
What?
Yeah. Okay. You can go back.
Yeah, of course. It's fine. No need to.
You click on the task and not go back. Go back.
Like.
Yeah, component. Yeah. Here I have created one component, that's
Yeah.
task component.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have export this as a default component.
Makes sense.
Okay. And in the app, here I'm creating a task component.
And you are importing it and you are using it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And this also I'm exporting as a default app.
Yeah.
I export default. And in the index file.
Yes.
Index file. Here what I have done that I have created a variable that array my task list as a
Yeah, and you
variable.
wanted to pass it.
And I want to pass it as an app task as this one.
Yes.
And
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that. And in the app,
In the app.
yeah.
Is it the app? This one? It's the app. Yes.
Yeah, in the above
You want to get it from the props.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and it's not working for me.
Because you are naming it a task here,
Yeah.
and you are giving it name to do list here. So it's two different variables.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Okay, no, I have just commented it. That one in line number 9. I just commented that I was.
No,
using
but
that.
but you are still using to do list.
Oh yeah.
You are getting to do list from the props.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? You have an object called props, and that object has a key called task.
Yeah.
But you are requesting a key called to do list.
List.
So of course it will be undefined all the time.
Okay.
Does it make sense? So really be careful when you name. This is like a famous
Yeah.
misconception. So
Maybe that one. And yeah, and the index is this index? Yeah.
This is
in the
index.
React DOM.render, I want to know whether I can write only one time or I can write 2 times.
what do you mean?
Like in this React.dom.render
Yeah.
and that app.document.get element by ID root. If I have mentioned somewhere different ID, like I want to get some other thing, some other file,
You want to render twice.
twice, yes.
But if you render twice,
Yeah.
it's like you have two bodies, which is a bit weird as an idea itself. Well, you can render like thousands of times. You can render every li into a different DOM. But as an app has always like one, like HTML has a structure. So there is a root and the root has like children. So if you render twice, it means like you will have two distinct apps.
But this index is only for formatting my page, right? If I'm taking from here and here.
The way you should create one component that renders all what you want to render.
Okay.
So if I have, like last time, what we did last time. In index.js, we had counter and list of users. We rendered them both inside main. So I can render multiple things here. Or I can even take counter and put it here.
suppose like if that UL, suppose you have mentioned some ID, okay?
What do you
Some
mean?
ID.
Which ID?
ID.
Ah, yeah, you can use an
equals to
ID.
Something.
Yeah, you can do
something,
it like
and
HTML
I want
ID.
to use that ID and put some other files, like how. We
Oh no,
do
you should
that.
not do that.
We should not.
Because the way you should think about components are closed environment. Component are closed board. What you know about a component, for example, list users. What I know is there is a component called list users. It's like get element by ID. Do you know what get element by ID is really doing inside?
Yeah.
No one knows. No, some people know, but we don't really care what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
We know that get element by ID, it receives an ID and it gives you a list of ID that matches that ID that given to it. So what you understand is a contract, is an interface between you and the. So the same thing. The way you should design your components, you should design components in a way that they accept some props and they return some HTML. But you should never know exactly what's inside the component. You should never know, oh, like for example, when I return here, oh, this is a UL, or sometimes I will make it an OL. This should not affect your program. The way you should treat your component as a closed word, as a small closed word, like a function. A component is just a function. A function returns a result as something. Component returns a result, which is HTML or JSX. And it takes some props. So this is the way you should think about it. You should never like rely on what the component is doing in another component, because these are two different components that should not overlap.
Okay.
So you should, if you have an ID, if you want to use this UL, you want to give it an ID and do something with it from outside, you should rethink that. You should rethink that and do it in the React way.
Yeah.
So
This is
how
the idea.
do I connect to component if I don't know that? Suppose here I'm creating.
What do you mean by
UI.
connect? Depends. Or what do you mean by connect?
Yeah, I'm telling you that here you have created a UL, okay, in
Yeah.
this component, and if I have another component, I want to join that component under this UL. If I don't know the ID of this one, how do I connect that?
Okay, so the way now, so you should move if you expect list of users to take more things, if you expect that other stuff needs to be inside the UL, you should extract the UL and put it outside. For example, you can put the UL here instead of here. So you should rethink your application and change it based on how you use it. Instead of just like, oh, I need a UL here, I need to put this here. No. Well, in the future, we will like in the next few classes, we will discover how we can put stuff and things. But overall, if you need something from the component, move it outside.
Move it outside.
If you want the UL to have something inside it, if I want the counter to be inside, I will move the counter here. I will not say get element by ID and put the counter there.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
I have one question
Yeah.
regarding like what we taught last time is class components. So I saw some videos. It's like they have like functional
Yeah,
components.
yeah.
also.
We will discuss that.
You are doing my question, so I was waiting.
We will
Use class and function.
we will discuss that, because when we finish class we will understand how it's useful and we can compare it. But now I will say, oh, this is the difference. It's
Yeah.
like, but what do you mean by the difference? So I'm trying to conclude classes, and today we will have like a good handful of things about classes, and after that we can compare, because you can never compare something that you still like. We still don't get the point of comparison in between. So we will get into that. Don't worry.
We have a marker in here? Probably not.
Yeah, there is.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah. More questions?
We can export component in front of class also, right? We can write text.
Yeah, you can do this. You can just go here and do export. And it will be like export object list of users. It will be named export.
But it was saying some error when I tried.
Then you remove that export before.
Yeah, I removed it.
You can say export here. Make sense? Mm. So I will move most of the code that we did last time.
Then we can fix it.
I will just say
Yunus,
yes.
we can achieve this one with one class itself with like state. It gives the same.
What do you mean by state?
Like all the properties we can put in like and state.
Yeah.
Like last time.
Yeah.
Because I tried and it looks like. And what is the difference
Props and
like props and state like?
But you can never change props. This is the problem. We
Yeah.
tried to do it last time with props. We had an X outside.
Okay.
You can never set state. And even if you change props, it doesn't work.
Um, then it's like if we are building app like generally we are like we see to do apps or something like if we click and then there is an option like edit or something.
Yeah.
So it's better idea to put on state or
We will see exactly. Of course, like we still didn't practice state a lot, so we will see over time.
yeah.
You will be able to wrap your head around it. Firstly. I'll just move these and this one to first three. No. Oh, it's a file. That's pathetic. Folder first week. Move. Okay, so let's close these things. Let's close everything. So I have a clean file now. Yeah. I should have a clean file. Yes, so yeah. Start. So delete this, we open index.js, we delete these. Yes. So let's start again now by just redoing sort of the to-do list that you did, but with proper like sort of, we would be able, for example, to add a new list or a new item or something like that, like make it more dynamic. Make sense?
Yeah.
So overall, I will just, I'll create new folder here called to-do app. And inside it, I will say to-do list. Okay? So I will just import React from React. And I will say class to-do list
Stand.
extends React component. And we have a render, which is the mandatory thing. We will say return null here.
excuse me, did you start recording?
Should be. Yes, I am. Cool. And we can say, as we said, export. We can even say export default here. We can say export or export default here. I just like to do it. It's more of a preference than a practical thing, honestly. Make sense? And these semicolons are optional, so it's up to you if you want to use them. I use them, but it's up to you. Yeah, I also just to check if it's enabled. Yeah, if you see, for example, if my code is not properly formatted, for example, it's like this, and it's like this, this. If I save, it will be formatted.
Oh,
I use something called Prettier.
Yeah,
So it-
I know that.
Yeah, so it's a tool that like transform your code and makes it beautiful. Well, it's subjective to be beautiful. But
And you use that in fine project as well. So it's a good idea. to
yeah,
install.
exactly. Whenever you are just like, in companies they will have restrictions. You cannot use Prettier as you like. But in your projects, it's just much better to just type, save, and it will be like poof,
Yeah.
more beautiful. So there is like VS Code extension. There is so many things you can do, but just use it. It's really nice. Especially, I can see that LoreView has like problems with the structuring code.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense. Sometimes it's really difficult to go back, like tab and space. It's like,
But we use in the browser, like we use the link within the extension.
so the extension will save and it will do it by default. Okay, so now we will have a to-do list. So let's say I will have the list here. I will say const list equal, and what I will start with is I'll say text is to do 1, to do 2. Make sense?
Yeah.
Simple. Here I will say UL, and I will put JavaScript, means I need curly braces, dot map. I take the list, the item, sorry, which is individual items here. And this goes to be an li and is item.text. And key, I will just use the item text. Because for now, I think to do 1, to do 2, it will be unique. And we add to do 3 and we add something like that. Make sense? We still didn't render it. So we go to the index, we import it from, it's to do app / to do list because it's inside the folder. So here we will do like this, and we say to do list like this. Does it make sense? Now I want a way to add the new item. For now we will just generate a new item. So it doesn't matter what its name. We will not have a form and things, but we'll just like go after that and build a format. But for now I just want a way to add new items. So let's say, so the way I will do it, I will just do this. I will just use math.floor. Random. And I will say times 10, because usually math.random gives you from 0 until 1. So times 10 and math.floor, which is rounding the number. Yeah, times 10, of course. Something like that. Or I think I will go with math. No.
It's better, yeah, it's
No. I think I will go with 2 fixed. 2 fixed, just like get this last 7 numbers or something. So we'll build the function. I'll just call it get ID. It does return this. Make sense?
Yeah.
Just a random function. So now we want to have a button here. So I will introduce a div. I will have a button. I'll call it add random item. And you remember last time we had a button, we can use onClick inside it. And we can say this dot add to do. And add to do is method, not a function inside, it's just a method. And we use arrow function to define it. We say method equal, we say just something equal arrow function. Make sense? So now we can just say console.log happening.
What is the difference there if we do function add method and then or array?
You mean like using function
Yeah.
here? Okay, we will go into that in a bit. So give me 5 minutes or 10 minutes and we will have to that. Make sense here? We have just a method invocation, which is like super simple. What I want here now is to actually add an item to the list. And I want my UI to add a third item. But you saw last time that if I will do, if for example I will say list.push or something, it will just add this list. So I will literally say list.push. I like to use concat instead. I'm sorry for that, it's just a preference. So push, because concat doesn't change the original array. It only returns the new array. So I would say const new list equal. I will concat what? I will concat new object with text. I would say you're all familiar with the. So I would say to do and get ID. Is this cryptic or clear? I can even say const new item. So I'm just putting get ID inside. So it will be to do static and get ID dynamic. It will change because get ID just gives me a random number. Make sense? Does it make sense or not?
Yes.
Cool. So now I can just do this. But that doesn't change my UI, which is the most important thing to do. But why is that happening? Why my UI is not changing?
State.
Yeah, but before reaching to state, why I'm reaching to state?
Because it is changing outside, not inside.
Exactly, it's just a variable. React doesn't know that the variable X change. React cannot like keep its work and observe every possible variable. Oh, new list changed. Oh, something changed. No, React cannot really do that. So there is no magic. So if you have a variable and you change it, don't expect React to know that the variable changed. Does it make sense? So the way we do that is by using state. So we say state equal an object. Remember, this is like you put it in the constructor and you say this dot state, as we discussed last time, but this is a shorthand. So we say state equal. What do we want to put inside the state? First of all, state is an object. I want to hold an object, and inside that object, I want to hold the list. So I will say list. And instead of putting the list inside here, I will move it inside here. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So list now, it's initialized inside my state.
Don't need to write the const in front of the list here.
But this is an object.
Okay, yeah.
This is an object.
Yeah.
This is an object. Like you can see that this is an object.
Yeah.
So we are not declaring a variable here. This is just an object.
So we're not using this dot state.
So here we use this dot state. This dot state. So it's working. Like at least it doesn't throw an error because I changed some things. But even when I add, nothing changed. The method is invocated, but nothing really changed. Why? I'm consuming it from a state, but why it's not changing?
Because we are not adding the new value to that state.
I'm changing the state here. The value, I'm changing the list inside the state. But I never told React back that, hey, I changed the list. Because as I told you, even the state itself, React doesn't know that if it's changing or not. React doesn't observe anything. So the only way that you can tell React that something changed is by calling setState. You remember? React, like you change this, you add something to it, you make it a number. React doesn't do anything. Even if you do like, I don't know, this dot state dot list. Like, well, this is kind of forbidden. It still works. Even that I made this dot state dot list 5. React doesn't know that it's 5 because React already like took the values. So now you can change it. You can do whatever you like with it. React will never like know that it changed. So the way we do that is by saying this dot set state. And it's an object.
Yeah.
Because we initialize it with an object, we change it with an object. I want the list to be my new list. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So now this should give me.
Why it's working now?
But there is no magic. It's clear why it's working. There's no magic. I got the original array. I added an item to the original array. I told React, this is the new array. Explicit. There is nothing like magic.
I know. But it's good when you see.
Well, there is magic, but not in the case of React.
Magic abracadabra.
Not in case of React, but there is magic.
Okay.
Is it clear?
Yeah.
So this is like you would be doing this for the next I don't know how many years. Like getting something from the state, changing it, putting in the state. For example, Facebook, you send the message. They have a message list. They take your message. They put it in the list of messages. They say set state. It renders new messages. Post. You post a new thing. The same thing. Someone gets online. They say this one gets offline. They get it. They change it offline, online to true. They put it back in the list. React renders. Netflix. You say next movie. They change the movie array to be next movie. It's like everywhere. So this is the pattern everywhere. You get something from the state. You change it. You put it back.
So we can master this.
Exactly. So this is like really the 100% core of React that you need to master, which is state. And every possible experience you can think about is powered by state. Literally. And even games. Even a game. You click something, it updates the state. Someone shoots you, it decrements your health, it increments your health, a score. There is an object of state. A snake game, how many like things you eat, and it's like the grid that you are working on. So literally, everything is done around like getting state, doing something with it, putting it back.
Yeah.
So whenever you shoot, there is a method called shoot that does something to the state. Whenever you delete, there is a method called delete that does something to the state. And so on and so on and so on. Does it make sense?
So what would you guys say is the difference from props to state? If you had to explain that.
Props cannot be changed.
Cannot be changed.
Cannot be changed.
But there is more dimensions to that.
Yeah.
It's not just about changing.
Yeah. You can make like space in one component props and then use about state in the other component. Something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But really the crucial, at least the way I understand it, of course, as we said before, it's an abstraction model more than a real thing. So the way you understand state and props is the way you kind of understand it. Everybody has a different understanding of it. Of course, there is like the absolute manner. But overall, the way I think about it is that props, so when you have a function, your function take parameters or arguments. Same thing with a component. A component take props from the parent. So someone gives the component props when he renders it. Could be a component, could be something else. But usually component render another component. There is no third factor. So when you render a component, you give it props. So props are received from outside, usually the parent. But state, it's something that you initialize, you control, you change inside yourself. It's like more of your state. You're happy, you're sad, you change yourself. Well, sometimes outside things can affect you, but they affect you the way you like. They affect you the way you want, because it's inside you.
Can we use both within the company?
You always use both. Most of the time you use both. So you receive something from the parent, for example, the counter.
Okay.
The counter that every time you click, it will increment by 1. The state is the best candidate to hold the state of the counter, how it's changing. But for example, if I want to start the counter from 20 or want to start the counter from 30, That's like something the parent decide. Because somebody who's using the counter component can initialize it with or for example, let's say we have a component that's called pagination. So it's a component that manages pagination. So the component has a state of all the loaded stuff. When you click next, it will load more things and put them on the screen. So this is state. But let's say how many items you display at once. Is it 20? Is it 30? Is it 40? This is configuration you're getting from the parent. So the parent will run the component called pagination and give it props per page, 20 or per page 30. So just think of props as sort of a configuration thing to the component. And state is something that the component interacts with. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And we will see in the future that we can even like pass our own state to the children.
Yeah.
Because this list, so we will try to do it now. So instead of having this li here, I would say list item. Class list item. So we can say return, but we don't have item text. So I will take it from props. I will say this.props. I'll say text. And here I say text and text. And here I say key equal item.text. And text equal item.text. Because by passing the text here, I can take it from here. Does it make sense? I pass the text here, I take it from here. I can name this, for example, like value. And this should be value. And this should be value, and this should be value.
So in one word, you create a box, and then outside you put argument inside.
Exactly, it's like a function.
Yeah.
Literally, think of React component as a function. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And now we can add new items. But what's really interesting is that this value, from where it's coming, from here,
Name of the
it's item.text, an item from where it's coming, from the list, and the list from where it's coming, from state. So you can see that this component, a child component, it's consuming the state of its parent.
Yeah.
But the child doesn't know that it's state. The child only knows that I'm taking value, and I should display value. We can even convert it to be a static thing. We can see here random one. And even we add, it will be always random one because we hard code it. Does it make sense? So state is like, it matters on the parent level. So the children can get state, but they don't know that it's state. They only see it as a normal prop.
Yeah.
So you can pass your state as a prop. So technically I can receive a prop, but maybe it's a state. But it doesn't matter if it's state at the end, because it's just string. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I will pass random here or item.text. The only difference is the value, but how we treat it, how we display it, that doesn't make any difference. Is it clear?
Yeah.
No questions? Okay, let's go back to the question that you asked before. He asked a question before about if we move this to a function. Of course you can. There's an issue here. Oh yeah, you don't need the function. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just
from the outside of class.
Yeah, so we have, this is like, you can understand it as a function. But it's not a function. It behaves like, so the difference, this is normal function, this is an arrow function. Why we are using these instead of these? I explained this a bit last time, but it wasn't that clear. So let's go through it. The first thing, let's try and run it. There will be an error. Just changing a function to a function, they told us that it's the same. So why changing this to this makes an error?
This.
Uh,
Yeah.
This.
It's because of the this. So let's try and just do something.
But it was something with binding?
Something with binding, exactly. HTML, CSS, console, output. Let's say I have a function called test, or let's say I have an object. Const object equal name, my name, and say hi. It's this dot name, and it's a console.log this dot name. So technically I can say console.log. No, I don't need that. I can just say object.say hi, and it says my name. Just say console.clear here, so it clears every time it runs. Output .run.js console. Make sense? Simple. Super dummy. Clear?
Yeah.
Let's say I will have a set timeout. I want to print the say hi after 2 seconds. Object.say hi. I don't run the function, I only give it as a parameter. So I'm not running it, I'm only passing it. Run. It's like this random JSPin output. It's not my name anymore. The function lost its context. Why it's that? Because as a matter of rule for JavaScript, it doesn't matter, like listen to this really well, like it doesn't matter how you define the function. What matters is how you call it. So here you can say that who's calling set timeout? Who's calling object.say hi? In the beginning, I was calling it. So it was saying hello, my name. But in the second time, who calls it? It's the set timeout. So who's responsible for calling object.say hi? It's set timeout. So the context of object.say hi is not object anymore. It's the set timeout. So who's calling the function is responsible for setting its own context. So that this is not defined the way you define your function, it's defined the way you call your function and who calls your function. So if you give your function to a button and you click the button is responsible for calling the function. Therefore, the button is responsible for setting the context of the button of the function. Does it make sense? So if you have a this inside a function and you give it to somewhere else, you give it like somewhere else to call it, you should not expect that this to refer to what you are thinking about. You can never.
You have to give this to that.
So, there is so many tricks you can avoid that. One of them is using binding. So you can say hi dot bind object. So if you say const new func and you give a new func here, this will say my name. It will be correct. Why? Because I said a function. So like map and filter on the array, you can get them for granted. You just define array and you have map and a filter. Same thing. When you define function, you get some methods inside it from the prototype. And one of them is bind, like apply and call. So bind creates a new function with the context that you give it to it. So this function, new function, it will be always hard-coded to this. So in another word, if I will say an object here, and I will say name is Yunus, it will say Yunus. Why? Because this function, not the say hi, the new function that it's returned from the bind. Because bind doesn't change the function, it returns a new function. And it's always bound to this. It can never change, literally. Whatever you do, you pass it anywhere, it doesn't matter. It will be hard-coded to this. Does it make sense? This is why in the old React code, you will see people binding methods. And the way they do that, they define a constructor. It takes, and they say this dot add to do equal this dot add to do dot bind this. It's a bit cryptic, but what we are doing here, I will redefine. So we can make it simpler. I'll say let's say I add to do 2. I will take my original add to do, bind it to this class, and return it and put it in this add to do. So now if I want to call add to do, I don't call add to do. I call this dot add to do 2. Because add to do 2 is the bounded version of add to do. Is it a bit?
Sorry, just a bit confused.
Yeah.
Why did we pass this into the dot bind?
Because
why not
what-
add to do?
So you say like this dot add to do?
No, I thought we were binding.
When you bind, you give a context. So you want to bind it to what? What do you mean by binding? Is like, so you have a this inside the function. You want the this inside the function to refer to something. That's the process of binding. It's changing the this inside it. This is. So when I say binding it, means changing the this inside it.
So we have in that object this dot name and this dot age. Whatever contains this.
Yes.
The function.
So now this, we define this to be this object now. So this inside this say hi, not inside this say hi. We create a new version of say hi, it's new function, with the this referring to this object.
Okay.
What do we write here? This.
This?
Yeah.
Well, this doesn't exist here because we don't have a global scope. There is no class here or something.
Okay. That's
In the other times we had a class, so I said like, I'm inside a class. I want to be always in the context of the class.
What if I write something else inside the name that means maybe last name, something?
What do you mean? You mean last name here?
No, in that bind, inside the bind.
Oh yeah, you mean like last name here?
Yeah.
That will be undefined because it will check this dot name and this object doesn't have a name property.
Yeah, okay.
So it will not find it.
It match to that.
It's not about matching, it's about changing a context.
Okay.
Imagine that you have a car from Ford and all the cars from Ford, they have the same engine. So you can literally get one car, which is your function, and swap the engine. So literally we are swapping the engine, the context inside the function. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So this is why this one doesn't work. Because add to do, we are passing it to the button. And who's calling our add to do? The button.
Yeah.
So who's defining our context? The button. So if I will say this dot set state or this dot state, the button doesn't have a state. Because it's lost inside the button now.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Of course, there's a lot of details, but this is what you should retain. That the this is not preserved. So sometimes you need to change it. An easy hack or an easy fix for that is using this. An arrow function. Why? Because an arrow function cares only about where it's defined. So when you give an arrow function a first context, you can never change it. Does it make sense? So if you have an arrow function here and you give it to the button, all the rules that I said that the function can change and stuff, they are not available for arrow functions. Arrow functions, they are defined here. They hold that this, oh, I'm defined here. This means the class. I will stick to this, that is the class. Regardless if you pass it to a button, they can never affect the arrow function. Does it make sense? So this is the good thing about an arrow function. Of course, function is also more dynamic. You can do so many things with functions. You can bind them, reuse them for multiple objects. You can do so many crazy things. As I can, like said, no, I defined high inside this object. I could reuse it for this object. It's like you can do so many things, but at the same time, it's not safe until you master it really well. So arrow functions are sort of a quick fix for that.
Another way to say this also, like the arrow function, it gets the scope from the enclosing scope. So like what is enclosing and to do, like what is kind of surrounding it, it's the to-do list. Okay, so this will come from the enclosing scope, which is the class. So that's where you get this from.
Yeah, and it can never change. Never. But with the function, you never know. You never know. You give it to a button, it will be a completely different thing. You give it,
So
so
it's safer to use the arrow function.
yeah. But also functions are really powerful. Most frameworks they use function a lot because you can use it on. Once you define it, it's not static for one object. You can define it and you reuse it for multiple objects. But for the sake of simplicity and while writing React code, everybody uses this. Make sense?
Yeah.
So this is the issue with the functions and binding. So I'll just post this in the So our app is working now, overall. Make sense? So do you get exactly how like I'm rendering here to-do list inside the main, and every to-do list it's rendering multiple list items. In this case it's 2 items and I can add. Does this make sense? We are building sort of a tree. We have the main, to-do list inside it, and after that we have the list items. You can see here we have a main, a to-do list, and we have a div, we have a button inside it, we have a UL, we have list items. It's your fault.
It's a train.
It's a train of list items. A lot of them. Make sense?
Yeah.
I will do one other thing here. So if I will console.log here, this dot state dot list. So if I will console.log before and after. That's the train. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So when I add, so technically, what you can see here is that, so as I said, concat doesn't change the original array. So when I say concat, new list, this dot state dot list will not be changed. Concat never changed the list. Does it make sense? It's not like push. If you can just please make it silent. So concat never changes the list. Make sense? So this dot state dot list will be referring to the old list. But when I say this dot state new list, I changed it.
You change the old state.
The old state. So now the new state refers to this dot state. So this dot state dot list refers to the new list.
Yeah.
So let's try that. they are both 2, even after. Why? It's a weird thing. So this dot state, you should imagine it like a set timeout. It doesn't execute straight away. So for example, if you have a set timeout with 0, and after it you have a console.log, the console.log will run before the set timeout, even that it's 0,
Yeah.
because it goes
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
event queue and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
with you, yeah.
Make sense? So it's the same way with set state. Set state doesn't run straight away. It waits for your function to finish and runs after that. So this set state is not executed immediately. The way you should understand it is like it's the last thing that to be executed.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Does
why console log after goes before because of queue of
Yeah.
is that set state.
So this is why. So set state is not it's not executed immediately. It's like a set timeout. Why?
Yeah.
Because React needs to like reconstruct all these items and compute the difference between them and all this bullshit. But this is not something React can do like this. It needs some time. And React doesn't want to block you. So React will say, okay, you will tell me to update the list. I will do it. But I will tell you when to do it. But I will do it, but not now. So I will give you back the control so you can run back your code. And React will do it whenever there is time. Because sometimes you have like huge lists that needs 2 seconds to update. So React will not be blocking you here. It will say, okay, you want to update. It's like you are telling React, or you are telling like waiter in a cafe, I want coffee. But that doesn't mean that you will be like holding him until you get your coffee. You just get coffee, and whenever he's ready, he will get you back. So it's the same thing with set state. With set state, you are telling React to change a value, but that doesn't guarantee that it will change immediately. Make sense?
Yeah.
But what if I want to print something or do something after the state changes? Like I want to print after the state changes. So there is a different signature to the set state. So set state takes seconds parameter, which is just a function. So I'll give it an arrow function,
Console log.
and I give it console log. Now if I will click, I have after, which is 3 items. Why? Because this function will not be executed until React will be done updating and doing everything with the UI.
So it just provided some sort of delay to allow
Yeah.
it
So
to
if
process.
we are not doing this, we can never know.
When React, yeah, it's done, yes. It's asynchronous.
Yeah.
It's not synchronous.
Can we use async away?
Not really, because it doesn't have a predictable like.
Okay.
It's not like an HTTP call or something. There's so many things. So for example, if you put 2 set states here, React will not update twice. React will group them both. So React is a bit smart about like updating the state. Does it make sense?
Theoretically.
Yeah.
Practically it's going to be wrong.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, but yeah, this is
Coding.
Yeah.
If we're not going to console log, we'll still put the arrow function there, though, right?
if you are not console logging, you don't need to pass anything.
Don't need to pass.
Like I wasn't passing anything before. I just passed something now to point you to
To allow.
point my
But
finger.
the second parameter we are using only to test it. We cannot.
For example, sometimes you say, when I change the state and it's done, I want to do something.
Like
For example,
Yeah.
yeah, like a callback. Like when the user log out and it's done logging out, I want to do something. Or when you delete an item, I want to go to the server and delete the item from the server. Stuff like that.
And we are doing that here.
Yeah.
The new state.
Because I want to do it in a place where it's guaranteed that it's already done on the in terms of UI. Because this is the only place where React guarantees you that I'm done printing this in the render. Any questions?
After doing my work.
So it's clear here that we are clicking the button. The button is firing the
Yeah.
ought to do. So who can kind of like try to re-explain it again? Volunteer. Not in a like. This is not like. Try to do that even if you don't, because that would be a good idea. Because you would be stuck, and I would be able to help you. So it's not that I'm trying to test you or something. It's more about. No one to volunteer? No one to volunteer?
Oh God. I think the semantics are not good when speaking.
It's take your time and just like, yeah.
Console logs generally immediately fires, and like this state, it takes time to what they call give a new list.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it takes time. So we will put a callback function which will fire after set state
It's done.
done.
Yeah.
So for that we put that arrow function and console log inside.
It doesn't
that
need to be an arrow function, it's just a function.
function.
A
And
callback.
yeah, callback, and then console log inside callback. So that console log will log when that function will
state.
call.
Yeah. When it's done.
Yeah, when it's done.
Precisely. And who can explain the general flow? What's happening here? Not about this. Forget about this.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think you get it really well. So overall, what's happening, what we are rendering. So starting from this one, what's happening here?
Okay, let me give it a try. We have the structure of the project, the layout. I'll start with index.js is
Yeah.
the entry point
Precisely.
Yeah.
for the project.
Which is this one.
Yeah.
Which is that one. So we have our the render React.render,
method.
which is the main entry into the app itself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The first component, if we have our mockup, we would have kind of marked it up in a way that this is how we will render the render. So the first component in this case is to-do list. And to-do list has, the children will call it, other components that it calls. And it depends on how the mockup is. If we have more than one component
Yeah.
in the app, we can list that there into the app, and
Yeah.
then stack it up like as we execute it. So when we go into the to-do list, we have to do. We have our other components listed in the class. So can we go into the to-do list?
Yeah, so here we are rendering the main, and inside it we render the to-do list.
To-do list, yeah.
So we go to to-do list.
To-do list. And then we have our to-do list components in here where we define the state and the data that we want to render. Okay, which is the state that we want to render, which is the list.
So the first thing when React see to-do list, React goes and render.
Render what-
That's the first thing that happens. React renders.
renders, which is a list in this. And within the render, we also have another component, which is the list item that we want to render.
Yes. So we have a dynamic, but if you can go a bit more details in like just read it like line 30, line 31, line 32, stuff like
Okay,
that.
yeah,
Just
okay.
like-
Okay, line 35.
not like with details, just
Yeah, line 35, we have another component that we're rendering within the to-do list, which is the charge to the to do. And within that, we are passing it a value, a key, and also the value that we want to render.
We're passing props.
Props.
Yeah.
Yeah. Key doesn't count as really props because you cannot access it from the component. Key is like separate
So
special
we're
thing.
passing props, which is the value, to the list item. And I think the component is also in that which
Yeah.
is this,
Which is this component.
which is that component. And what are we doing? Yeah, we're passing it. So we're taking the props and then we're rendering it as list.
As a list item.
As list item.
As an li. Yeah. Not as a list. Yeah.
So we have another, is it the add to do,
So we have a button
the button, yeah.
with an action to fire or something to do when clicking.
Yeah.
When clicking.
Yeah.
So when you click, there is an on click.
Yeah. Very similar. The function fire.
Which is this one.
Yeah.
And the function fires. We create a new item.
Yeah.
We concat it to the array.
The area.
We just log it. We say set state. We update the new array, the new list, and React will re-render again. Make sense?
Yeah.
Can you click on the index.js?
What?
Index.js.
Yeah.
Here, if I want to add one more component, like a list of components,
What do you mean?
like if I'll just write to do and some other, like if I want to put
Custom component?
more
element?
than
If you have
more
more
than
than
one
one.
component, so
I can duplicate this.
Yeah,
So I have to make a div or main or something
No.
inside that. I can.
We have a main now here.
Now, if I'll delete that.
Yeah, here either you can use something like div or main, or you can use a fragment, as we
Yeah.
discussed before.
Only that. Okay.
And the fragment will not exist. It's only semantic for React.
Just like that, your main function.
And you can see here that we have two different components rendered on the screen. Literally the same component.
Now if we add...
And I can add
yeah.
item and they are two separate components. Literally.
Yeah.
If, for example, I have an ID inside it and event listeners, that would be like every time I add something here, it goes and touch this one. But now because we have closed component that doesn't know anything about the outside world.
Yeah, the same variable names and...
Exactly. So you can see here,
There should be one main.
So you can do that. Start
Yeah.
the component off.
does it make sense?
Yeah.
So now we will explore another thing, which is I think the last concept in React, which is life cycle. And as the name said, life cycle, which is a life cycle of the component. What I mean by life cycle, it's literally the word. Every person has a life cycle. So you start, like, you are born, after like you will die and stuff. So this is life cycle. So a React component has also like a life cycle. And what does the really life cycle refers to is like when the component is rendered, it counts as a life cycle. When the component is updated, it counts as a life cycle. When the component is deleted, it and mounted, counts as a life cycle. Does it make sense? So if you want to do something after the component is shown, or you're doing something after the component will be deleted, you can use life cycle for that.
No, why do you need life cycle?
Yeah, for example, let's say you have a component that needs some data. For example, like the messages in React. You have messages inside chat. When you click on someone, messages start loading. How we know that this component was shown and we need to load messages?
It's like a
By using
process.
lifecycle. So, hey, I'm on the screen, so I can go and get data. For example, you delete the conversation. I don't want to keep the data in place because I don't want to block your browser with a lot of chats because sometimes there's a lot of messages or pictures or videos. React will tell me, hey, I'm leaving the screen and I can do some cleanups. But this is just like really small idea about it, but like the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you like with like life cycle. For example, render. Render itself is a life cycle because it represents a specific point in the lifetime of a React component. At some point we render, at some point we update, at some point we get removed, at some point we get rendered. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Can we say, is it like a process from when we start to when we finish?
Yeah, exactly. It defines like points in time
Yeah.
where it's really important.
Okay.
Like the same way you do it in your life, your birthday, your stuff like that. So the same thing in React. React gives you like specific points. when it gets rendered, when it gets removed, stuff like that. So let's do it here, for example. So the way you define lifecycle is just a normal method. So render is a lifecycle. This is why I said before render is a special method. Because there's a convention between you and React, which is a lifecycle. It's like, for example, 10th of August is my birthday. So it's like that day is special for me. So it's like a convention between me and people around me, something like that.
Your birthday is 10 of August?
Yeah.
My wife's also.
Cool. Nice.
Live.
So you get the idea. So the way you do that, there's like different like life cycles. I will show you a picture. React Life.
Motion with
So this is a weird diagram. What we are really interested in now is this. It's only this. We don't care about updates because there's 3 phases. We will discuss each phase in a separate way. So this is the first thing. What does mounting mean? When you say, for example, let's say you put this to-do list here, const x equal to-do list. We will still have only one to-do list, not two. Why? Because this component was created, but it was never rendered. So the process of rendering is when the component gets picked up by React Render. And it will be about to go into the screen. We call this process mounting. And the first step after mounting is what? Is the constructor. Because React needs to construct the component. And this is why we were putting the state here. Because technically this gets turned into this. And literally React takes this and say this dot and paste it there. Or Babel or something. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So we'll just use this now just for the understanding the life cycles. So now we know the first life cycle, which is constructor. That's the first life cycle. So I will put a console.log here. After that, there is this, but this is going to update, so we don't care about it. We only care about the stuff that gets cut here. There is render.
Yeah.
So after the constructor, React goes to what? To render. Let's put a console.log here. Render. After that, React goes to what? Component did mount. What does it mean? Component did mount. English. Component did mount. English. Component did mount. I cannot explain. I cannot go better in English than the name itself. Like, you can confirm that. You can confirm that. You can confirm that. Component did mount. It means the component is done mounting. Component did mount. So how to define that? You say component did mount. Means after the component will be done mounting and it will be on the screen. And usually mounting means what? Means putting it in the screen. So it will be constructor, render. Render means putting it in the screen, rendering it. After that means it's already in the screen. React calls component did mount. So we can say here console.log did mount. Make sense?
Yeah.
So this is mounting. Let's go and try that. We already have it. Constructor, render, did mount. Does it make sense? At least order wise.
So did mount is also add to do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when the app, when the to-do list component is done mounting, React will fire this.
We find that
Oh, okay.
automatically. Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking where you call
Call
this?
it.
No, it's like render. Did we ever call render?
No.
Did we ever call constructor? No, it's by React.
Okay.
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 So that is the life cycle.
That's a life cycle. You don't create your birthday. At one point it needs to happen because it's like a cycle. Well, you need to plan for birthday and stuff, but overall the day will come regardless of your intervention. Does it make sense? So we have constructor, render, component did mount, and I think it make a lot of sense English wise.
Yeah.
Words like constructing, rendering, and mounting. So you tell me what's the purpose of these? Well, depends on many use cases. For example, usually when I want to get data, I did it in the component did mount. Because when the component is done and it's on the screen, I can show a loader and go and get some data. Because I can never know that if I need that data or not before. I can also not, Facebook cannot fetch all the discussions with all your friends. That would be like gigabytes of like discussions and friend and images. So when you open a chat message, the component is mounted because that's a component. And they will request the data because React will call component. So what do you do? In life cycles, you put your code and React will call it for you. Does it make sense? For example, I can, like, this is super stupid, but I can just do something here. I can say set timeout. After
Why not, for example, like getting data in the constructor? Like
Because
that comes
sometime-
before-
Yeah, sometimes the constructor gets fired, but the component never had the chance to show. Sometimes, for example, like sometimes React needs to do a lot of things. For example, if you have like a huge list in the constructor, you want to show something, but you are not really sure that the component is on the screen and it's ready to get data. So the only point is time that you are sure that the component is getting, it's literally on the screen and it's on pixels. Because for example, let's say you have like 30 components and each component takes this size. What do you want to show? These components or the other 30? Maybe you will not even learn the other 30 because for example, Facebook, they use like virtual scrolling. So they don't even show the other components. You think when you're scrolling that there is components,
Yeah,
but they are loaded in demand. You know what I mean? So constructing a component doesn't really necessarily guarantee that the component will go into screen. Especially now with new React versions, there's these like asynchronous nature where multiple components can be rendered and under render they can be stopped because there is more priority. You get the idea? So the only way to guarantee that a component needs data is by it like showing in the screen. But of course, there's some people fetching data in the constructor. If you have a simple use cases, or also if you have like proper caching and stuff where you're not afraid. But usually the safest point to fetch data is the component did mount. Make sense? So let's say here I have a set timeout, and I will say alert, welcome, or like the annoying website, subscribe to our like how it's called, GDPR rules, like that bullshit where you see it everywhere. So now for example we refresh after 3 seconds. Oh, GDPR rules, and accept it. You cannot if maybe you don't want to show an alert, maybe you want to show like a nice pop-up or something, but this is just an example. So this is an example of how you can use use case. So it's like, for example, after 10 seconds of user browsing your website, you want to do something. It's like something like that. Does it make sense?
Question. Did mount is the last process.
Yes, until now, it's the last.
Is that okay?
Compared, because we will discover more. But until now, we have constructor. Just keep the order in mind. Constructor, render, did mount.
So you said we can fetch data in a.
Yeah, we can do that.
But because it's the last, I thought did mount means the end of the whole process. We should have fetched the data.
No, did mount means like I'm done mounting. Not I'm done living, I'm done mounting.
Done looking.
I'm done loading on the screen. I have pixels of myself in the screen. This is what did mount means.
So then
You can like interact with the component and stuff. For example, now we mount, we deleted it. Now you can see here, we have did mount. Now we can start interacting with the component and stuff. So if I will go and comment these,
Okay. I created a new window. Now you want to go and
yeah, exactly. Oh no, you die. Oh no, you get stuff like that. So you can see here, constructor render did mount. If I will add a new item, I will have another render, because render gets called every time. So render is one of the few life cycle that is rendered that is called multiple times, because every time you want to show a new fresh result, you do that. Make sense?
Yeah.
So this is called the mounting phase, when the component get the chance to show. We have the updating phase, and it has its own life cycles. What I mean by the updating phase, it means when the component will be updated, like for example the props changed, or you said set state. Now we are using set state to change the component. That means that the component needs to re-render. It needs to update. So updating has its own sort of life cycle attached with it. And what are these life cycles? This thing, we will not discuss it. We have render. And after render, we have component did update. Not component did mount, component did update. So if I will define here component did update, so we have constructor, render, did mount. Nothing's happening. The user updates something. We call render again,
And then component did.
and component did update. So now we have this. I will also delete this happening. We have this. Render did update.
So what is the use case for that did update?
Yeah, so if for example you have some side effect or you have some logic you want to run after the component updated. An example, let's say you deleted friend from Facebook. So now Facebook needs to fetch new data because the friend is not your friend anymore. Or let's say for example you changed your, you paid for something. Let's say you are not an admin. You made yourself an admin. That means the interface or the data needs to change. So sometimes we fetch data initially, but also every time there is an update, we probably also need to fetch data or needs to do some different logic. For example, let's say you created a new to-do item. I need to go to the database or to the backend and save it. So that's like the did update. So anytime you want to associate some logic with updating, you put it in the did update.
In this case, what kind of logic we can put in did update?
Why not just do it in render?
Why don't we do it in render? Because in render, I'm not sure that it's really happening.
Okay.
Render is not done. The update is not done. Maybe the render will take like 2 seconds to run. Because my component, let's say I'm rendering a huge list. So render is not really guaranteed place. And render is called multiple times. So render is called for the mount and called for the update and called for multiple times. You can see it here. So render is not really a safe place where I can do my operations. It's rendered multiple times, and I can never predict the behavior of render. But component did mount, I'm sure it's happening after the did mount, and it will never happen again until I update again. So it is like specific hook in time where you are sure that this is happening. Does it make sense? Not a lot,
No.
but like
Not at all.
but the first idea. Do you get like the concept of the life cycle?
Yes, the concept I get, but what purpose to use it.
Yeah, for example, like let's say you have like,
In this case, for example.
well, in this case we don't have a lot of logic because if I want something to happen, so let's say,
What if like the to-do list was in a database and I removed an item? Would that be a use case for did update?
something like that. Anything. So for example, here let's say I would say alert added a new item. So when I add a new item, something like that, and we can even extend it more and go what he said. If for example I will add a new item, but the new item is only in my local computer. I need to go and do a REST call and update it. So did update is a really good candidate for that. So anything you want to do after your component updates, you do it in component did update. Could be millions of things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Could be doing side effect, could be showing users, could be, for example, like you show a notification here that the user was deleted. You do it in the did update.
Because it definitely seems like the way I've been writing lots of code in Render. That could probably have been in the...
Yeah, render is not a safe place because it gets called in multiple times in time, and you can never guarantee its semantics. So you can never guarantee that render was called because of an update or a mount or a delete or like. It doesn't have semantics. Render is only for rendering. So this is why we don't put that. But if you want to do anything after the component updated or after the component deleted, this is the best place to do that. Does it make a bit of sense now?
Yeah.
Of course, it's like you will tell me like, what's the use case of a function? Well, you can do anything you want with a function. So component did update. It's a function. The sky is the limit. Anything you want to do. You want, for example, you want the user to only be able to update 3 items, and after that, like, show him out of the screen or something like that.
Do we put our add to do in did update?
Yeah. Yeah, because up to do, it's calling the component did update to run. When we add it to do, we call set state, render, component did update. Make sense? So this is the updating phase. We have the unmounting phase, the third one, which is what? Which is when the component is about to leave the screen. So if you want to do something before the component leaves the screen, when the component is like disappearing, it's not on the screen anymore. React is deleting it. For example, you deleted a to-do item, you deleted something from the screen, it's going. For example, list of, when you click a friend, it shows a list of messages. And those messages are fetched on component did update. Okay? Or did mount. When you close it, it will disappear. That means you need to delete all the messages from memory and from object because you don't need them anymore. You cannot keep them. It's like a lot of data. So unmounting is the best candidate for that.
Sure you want to delete this?
Usually, it depends. Sometimes you want to delete them, sometimes you don't want, but most of the times you want to delete stuff. For example, if you have a set timeout, that it's happening all the time, you want to clean it when the component leaves. So let's say you have a component that fetches every 5 seconds. When the component leaves, you want to clear the timeout. So it doesn't keep running. So any logic. So usually component will unmount is the reverse of component did mount.
If you create set timeout in component did mount,
You remember to clean it. Because no one will clean it for you. React doesn't know that you created the set timeout. Make sense?
All the clearing things will be there, like clear interval, clear time set, clear.
Or maybe deleting data, something like that. Or maybe, for example, you have a view where you allow the user to only load 2 things at the same time. Let's say you have a paid Facebook, where you only allow the user to have 2 messages, 2 like chats at the same time. When the user open one, you increment the counter by 1. When the user clicks the second, you increment the counter by 2 in the component did mount. When user close one, you decrement it by 1. When the user close one, you decrement 1. So when the user opens a second one, it will not say, oh, you are already opening 2. No, I closed one of them. So you get the idea. It's like really, the sky is the limit. It's like just the functions. You can use anything, any logic. You can never limit them by a specific thing.
But we have to understand what we are doing.
The order.
In the order.
The order is the most important thing to understand. Make sense? So for example here, this component we can say component will end mount.
And we have to use same name, yeah?
Yeah.
The name convention is the thing. It's like render.
Yeah.
Name is the most important thing.
Mm.
So
That's fine.
will end mount. Okay. Now, technically, this component is never unmounted because it never leaves the screen. Make sense? But if this component will ever leave the screen, it will fire this before leaving.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? For example, let's say we have a button to delete this item. Technically, if you delete an item, that means you only updated the list.
So you're saying that if we want to add a button to delete the to-do one,
Yeah, that will not.
functionality we have to do to delete unmount?
No, we don't need to do that. But what I'm saying, if an item will disappear, that means it's leaving the screen. So it will call component will end mount before leaving the screen. So that's one use case. Or you are in a page and you are navigating to a second page, something like that.
So it's like in to-do list, if there is some task like is for today, and
Same
tomorrow
like
it
button
will
with
show.
add,
Yeah,
which calls update.
yeah, exactly. That's updating, and deleting is also updating. So deleting is updating the parent, but as for the item itself,
That's mount.
it's end mounting. So it's end mounting and deleting the item, but the parent is only updated. Make sense?
Yeah.
So let's get a small example running. Let's try. Well, I don't think we really have time, so yeah, we can make it after. So I will stop recording. And do you have any questions in these 4 minutes?
What can they have when we come back?
Maybe next Sunday.
I'm just
for
asking
sure.
if you have any.
Yeah.
Next Sunday for sure.
Of course.